Mueller. And I said, you know, why are you interested in this? Why are you doing this? And he kind of indicated that his law practice wasn't booming and that he was interested in being a judge in Iowa, where he was from. And he said he hoped that this would help him get noticed and that President Trump would then appoint him to be a federal judge.
And?
Well, he isn't a federal judge, but he is the acting Attorney General of the United States. I think it's beyond the scenario that he was imagining in June of 2017.
What do you think of that, John Dean, before I go and ask you other questions? What do you think of that?
I don't think you knew you were recruiting for the White House. But obviously it worked. We know that Trump watches television. We know he watches your show. We know he has opinions about it. So to hear somebody defending him obviously caught his attention.
Mm-hmm. John Dean, also the two highest officials handling oversight of Mueller's investigation, one of them being Rod Rosenstein, urged Sessions to delay the date of his resignation, but Trump wouldn't allow it. How does this look to you? What do you read into that?
Well, it's hard to know legally how this is all going to shake out. Mueller is very smart, probably will not take any preemptive moves and watch how this plays out before he decides what to do. But we don't know how it's going to play out. As John Barrett mentioned, you know, a lot of legal scholars question whether this is a legitimate appointment, and it can be challenged, and it probably will be challenged, Don.
Yeah, you think that's so? Do you
I think it's definitely going to be challenged. Anyone who's in litigation against the Department of Justice now has standing, has an injury to claim that the Department of Justice is not in proper lawful hands.
The question is, though, and I've heard people say, wonder if he's going to last through the weekend. Meaning?
Well, it's a political problem, it's an appearance problem, and I assume in the ranks of DOJ, it's an incredible morale problem. You know, this is bringing in somebody at the top who appears to have a very serious conflict of interest. Yeah. And by all other standards before this time, that's the wrong person for that job. That's what Jeff Sessions realized on day one, which led him to recuse himself. Whitaker should recuse himself at the very least, not commit himself to come in and Bigfoot on top of what DOJ is now doing.
Didn't you just say, but at all standards in previous times?
In previous times, yes.
Yeah. We're living in different times now. John Dean, the whole thing of Trump originally saying that he knows Matt Whitaker, and then today saying he doesn't, and then you saw what he just tweeted. I read what he just tweeted. He's done this sort of thing with Michael Cohen, with Paul Manafort. Is anyone buying this?
It is certainly a prelude to what generally, when somebody is on their way out, he suddenly gets a very foggy memory of who that person was, what kind of relationship they had, and as he distances himself, he telegraphs what he's going to do. He's going to leave this person hanging in the wind.
Do you think that this was, John Barrett, that this was all pre-planned? If you look at it, I think he was recommended, some people are saying, by the Federalist Society. They put him in this position. They had to know how he felt about the Mueller investigation.
I don't know if it was pre-planned that he would succeed Jeff Sessions, but I think there was an interest in having a friendlier White House-connected guy in the Department of Justice. You know, Rod Rosenstein, a consummate professional law enforcement career lawyer, was acting as Attorney General on top of the Mueller investigation run by a consummate professional law enforcement figure. This would bring in a political friend. How it would evolve from there, I think, has been happenstance.
It's just, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit, go on, John Dean.
There was earlier reporting that he was actually going after Rod Rosenstein's job as the Deputy Attorney General, thinking that Sessions might survive, but Rosenstein was being chatted up on his way out. Yeah. And there was quite a bit of coverage of that. That was the first time I really paid much attention to his name and did a little checking around to who he was, and I was surprised he was where he had arrived.
I think there's more stagecraft. I think there's more stagecraft with a lot of this than we all realize. But John, let me get John Dean. I want to get this. Yes. So I want to get your reaction. Some controversial views that were really stunning to a lot of people from the new acting AG. This was back in 2014, where he said judges should have a biblical view. The ADL is calling that deeply troubling. What's your take on that?
I think it is deeply troubling. The Justice Department traditionally had a large role in selection of judges. That's really moved over to the White House now, and that seems to be the place that judges are largely selected in working with the members of the Senate and the state and jurisdiction in which the judge is going to sit. But I think a religious test is exactly what our Constitution forbids. For him to even suggest this as a basis is very wrong.
Well, I just wanted to, how about John Barrett? His view, the landmark 1803, a Supreme Court ruling that established the judiciary's ability to strike down laws that violates the Constitution. He called it one of the court's worst decisions. That's really outside of the mainstream, including this whole biblical thing as well.
Well, the biblical thing is flatly unconstitutional. Article 6 of the Constitution says we don't have religious tests. So that's sort of flunk high school civics dumb. Marbury versus Madison is a foundation of constitutional law and the role of the Supreme Court, and widely understood. It's a consensus matter in anybody with legal training that the role of the court is to interpret with an authoritative position the meaning of the Constitution. To go back and reconsider that is really an attempt to nullify the judiciary entirely.
All right. I want you to stick around, both of you, because I want to talk about the Wall Street Journal's reporting that Donald Trump was involved in or briefed on nearly every step of the hush money payments made to former Playboy playmate Karen McDougal and porn actress Stormy Daniels, payments that may have violated campaign finance laws. Back now, John Dean, John Q. Barrett. Okay, so John Dean, I want to ask you about the Wall Street Journal reporting that the feds have evidence that President Trump was directly involved in paying off Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal. Do you get the sense that campaign finance laws were violated here?
It certainly would appear that way. As I read that Wall Street Journal story, I could just envision the indictment that could come out of all that, a conspiracy to violate the federal campaign laws. Whether that'll happen or not, since Michael Cohen has pled, is a good question. I doubt there'll be much further litigation on this in the sense of a prosecution. But David Pecker was also mentioned prominently in that story, and he appears that he might have had an immunity deal, as Weissenberg from the Trump organization clearly got an immunity deal. So I don't know that case is going to go much further, but it is certainly evidence of a conspiracy.
So this is according to the Journal, John Barrett, Trump met in August 2015 with David Pecker, and CEO of the company that owns the National Enquirer. Pecker offered to pay the silence of women who might publicize sexual affairs. And the bottom line here, this Stormy Daniels saga isn't going away. The people, some Trump supporters turn up their nose at it, saying, "Oh, why are you doing this?" But if you look at what happened with the Stormy Daniels saga, it uncovered Michael Cohen, who is now, been prosecuted or indicted, I should say, by the Southern District of New York. It has also made the president a liar. It shows him on Air Force One denying it, and then now it is true. So this saga is not going away.
No, and it connects obviously to not just Cohen, but to Pecker, to other employees of the Trump organization. And then the Trump organization is Trump Tower, and that's the site of the Russian meeting. And you've got strands that continue to overlap and are thick and important. So yeah, this conspiracy and another conspiracy interlink at some point. Their financial, their real estate, their relationships, their business. So I think it's not an extramarital affair or pornography or anything to turn your nose up at. It's potentially a very serious criminal matter.
I want to play the moment that I just mentioned aboard Air Force One about saying that he had no knowledge of these Stormy Daniels payments.
President, did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? Then why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no truth or allegation?
You have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know.
We've known John Dean for a while that what he said aboard Air Force One was not true. The attorney for Stormy Daniels, Michael Avenatti, says the president should be indicted. How do you see this unfolding?
Well, this case is now, of course, up in the Southern District of New York. It was something that was referred there by the special counsel, who apparently ran into some of it. along the way, but that's where it's unfolded, is in the Southern District. That's a traditionally, by long tradition, a rather independent U.S. Attorney's Office. Yet they will not, I cannot believe that they would go over the standing policy of the Department of Justice, which since 1973, renewed in 2000, has been, you do not indict a sitting president. There are people who disagree with that law, and on strong basis that no man is above the law. It is a dubious policy position, but I think it's going to stand, and the Southern District is not going to test it at this point.
Yeah. As he said, John Baird, under the current Justice Department's guidelines, a sitting president cannot be indicted. So, is this president protected?
Well, he might be protected from criminal indictment, but a misrepresentation and a series of, not just petty matters, but substantive, potentially criminal matters on which a president is lying to the American people becomes a question of political oversight. We've just gotten access to the roadmap that the Watergate grand jury sent to the House of Representatives in 1974. It was unsealed after all these decades through litigation. And a big part of the roadmap is President Nixon lying to the American people, which the House then regarded as a substantive potential ground for impeachment in 1974.
So what are you saying here?
I'm saying that a Congress that believes in truth and a president upholding high values in the Oval Office could regard this as a high crime of a political nature, and in an impeachment context following the Watergate precedent, and indeed also following the Bill Clinton precedent, regard a lying president as a matter of its interest.
Well, you said a what Congress? Responsible Congress?
Responsible investigative Congress.
Investigative Congress. I mean, John, we've had this conversation several times. How many different ways are we going to have it? But, even though the Wall Street Journal found that Trump was involved at nearly every step of the way with these agreements here, do you see that that this is only the tip of the iceberg, and if Congress really wanted to act on it, that more could come out and that they might actually be able to do something about it?
Don, we've been talking about this for a couple of years now, and what we see is a continuous pattern of criminal behavior by this president. He's very conspicuous, he's very open about it, and he feels protected, apparently, that as long as he's got the Senate under Republican control, that never will they find a two-thirds vote, 67 votes in the Senate, to hold him guilty of an impeachable charge or remove him from office based on such a finding. So I think that's his firewall is the Senate. So he'll try to politicize anything the House does if they seriously pursue this.
John and John, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you. The former First Lady's tell-all. I'm talking about Michelle Obama. Tell-all new book. We're going to tell you what she's saying about President Trump and why she says she can never forgive him. Michelle Obama not pulling any punches in her upcoming memoir titled Becoming. The Washington Post reports the former First Lady, takes on life in the spotlight, her time in Washington, and her anger at the current president for spreading the birther conspiracy about her husband. Let's discuss now. Krista Thompson's here. She reported on the book for the Post. Hello to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Don.
She goes there, right?
Yeah, no, she totally does. This is not your average Washington read. She reveals some new things about herself and talks really frankly about her feelings about Donald Trump. I mean, she tells everyone what she really thinks.
So let's talk a little bit more specifically about what's in the book. She said that she would never forgive him for spreading the birther conspiracy because it put her family in danger. It's deeply personal for her.
Yeah, no, this is right. She talks about, hearing him as he's beginning to think about running for president, talking about birtherism, spreading that conspiracy theory, and then talking to the Secret Service and hearing that the threats against her family had increased. And she, kind of says that she knows that they're nuts and kooks out there and worries about if someone going to get a gun and find her daughters, and just talks about this in some really personal terms. This is not empty rhetoric as far as she's concerned.
Yeah. And more here. She says, this is a quote, her body buzzed with fury. And she said when she heard that Access Hollywood tape and she wrote this, it was an expression of hatred that had generally been kept out of polite company, but still lived in the marrow of our supposedly enlightened society, alive and accepted enough that someone like Donald Trump could afford to be cavalier about it. What else did she say about Trump?
You know, she goes on in that passage to talk about, you know, folks who are seen as others in this society, who are not people in power, minorities, and how this kind of language really sets folks apart. She also talked about, you know, the 2016 campaign and watching him on stage with Hillary Clinton and how he moved around, and she felt like he was stalking her even on the stage and sort of being menacing. And then on election night, as the returns start to come in and, you know, Florida doesn't look like it's going Hillary Clinton's way, she said she just blocked it all out, went to bed, and, you know, was basically shocked at the election outcome.
Did she talk, you remember all the memes and about her on the inauguration day, that she didn't look like she was, quite frankly, having any of it? Does she talk about inauguration day in the book?
She does, yeah, that comes up in the book, and you know, she talks about the routine, the transition of one family coming, another leaving, and she's going through the process and understands that. And then she looks up at the stage at the invited guests in the VIP area for the Trumps, and sees what she says, you know, are a bunch of white males, and that it doesn't reflect the diversity of America. And she looks at those optics and kind of thinks to herself, well, they clearly don't care. And she writes that she at that moment decided that she was not going to be smiling through the inauguration and just kind of turned it off.
She did go there. Did she talk about the current First Lady at all?
No, there's a mention about riding to the inauguration in the car together, but other than that, she doesn't talk about her much. And, you know, she doesn't talk about many former first ladies. She makes a point in the book that she didn't feel like she really had role models for the role, since she was the first African-American woman to serve as first lady, and that she identified, you know, not so much with other first families, but, you know, with civil rights leaders that you might think of. You know, she talked about Sojourner Truth and the lineage of African-American women who kind of paved the way in this country, and that those being the kind of historical figures that she more so identified with.
When they go low, we go high. This is what she told NPR when asked about that, if that still applies. She says, I think even now, even more now, because I think what's the alternative, right? Are we all just going to go low? Are we all just going to be in the mud, kicking and screaming and hating and wreaking havoc and fear? Is that the recommendation? I think we are living in a time that proves that point even more so. So it's not about the politics for her, it's about the principle.
That's right. You know, she talks about really not liking politics in the book, you know, so I'm sure the question is going to come up, is she going to run for office? She says emphatically in the book that she's not, that 10 years spent in the spotlight, in public life, in the political sphere, showed her that it's just a very nasty space, and it's not something that she wants to do.
The Obamas are going to have to attend big events with the Trumps for years to come. How is she able to do this when she obviously dislikes him so much?
Yeah, she talked in the book, you know, she doesn't answer that question, but she talks about being a person of grace and understanding that she is under what she calls a gaze, the public gaze, that, you know, that the media is watching, that the country is watching, and that requires a certain kind of behavior that she wants to model. So I don't think that she'll have, you know, much trouble being in those spaces and behaving in a way that she feels like, you know, kind of reflects the dignity of the office. You know, she definitely understands that.
Well, we thank you for coming on. Thank you, Krista Thompson.
Thank you.
Well, President Trump responding to the former First Lady today, and you won't be surprised to hear he did not follow her mantra of when they go low, we go high. President Trump today responding to the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, writing that she'll never forgive him for endangering her family with his birtherism.
says she will never forgive you for your birther comments in the past. Oh, Michelle Obama said that? I haven't seen it. I guess she wrote a book. She got paid a lot of money to write a book. And they always insist that you come up with controversial. Well, I'll give you a little controversy back. I'll never forgive him for what he did to our United States military by not funding it properly.
What's wrong with him with everybody making money but him? Okay. Here to discuss this, Nina Turner, Alice Stewart, Rick Wilson, the author of Everything Trump Touches Dies. He said the same thing, almost the exact same thing about April. I guess she got to make a lot of money and she gets a contract from publicity, and then she says, oh, she made him a lot of money to write a book. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with making money. He's the one that's always talking. The theme of the show was money, 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 money. Oh, my gosh. Anyway, I digress. He just couldn't take the high road there, Rick. Good evening, everybody, by the way. But no, he didn't. He did not take on Michelle Obama. He made a jab at the former president.
Sure. Well, but Don, the thing about Trump, he's always very sensitive about his book. And I like to joke that the only thing that Donald Trump and I have in common, we both had a New York Times #1 bestseller, only I wrote mine. But his entire snappishness about money, the pettiness right now, this is a guy who's under a lot of stress, a lot of tension. He recognizes how bad the world is going to look in a few weeks. And this has been a week of calamities for him from top to bottom. I mean, we are spending our Friday evening laughing about Donald Trump and this guy Whitaker, who is the biggest clown in the clown car so far of the Trump administration. It's going to go so badly off the rails for this thing. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this behavior in the next couple of weeks.
Alice, let me bring you in because I want to ask you about, the former First Lady, doesn't she have every right to talk about her feelings after Donald Trump peddled a total lie about her husband? Is the president angry because his lie is just coming home to roost now and they're actually responding to it?
Oh, sure. She has every right to say whatever she wants to say in her book. And from what I've heard of the book and the excerpts I've read, it's poignant, it's personal, and at times it's political because those paths all crossed when she was the First Lady. And look, she brought up some very valid points about President Trump in her book. She certainly talked about his unfounded nonsense claims about birtherism, and she also pointed out the way he treated women and the way he bragged about sexually harassing women. And those were valid points that she observed about the sitting president. And when he was asked about her comments about the birtherism, he had every opportunity to set the record straight and to defend himself as to why he brought it up. And instead, for some reason, heaven knows why, he goes off on some tangent about
military spending,
President Obama and funding the military. But I think she had the right to say exactly what was on her mind, and I'm looking forward to reading the book because I think she was a role model as a First Lady and as a mom and as someone that I think a lot of little girls like Parker Curry that you've talked to that admired her painting, she has a lot to be proud of, and I'm looking forward to reading the book.
And Nina, I think a lot of folks are, because especially if you look at the pre-sales on Amazon, right, Nina? Nina, I've been wanting to talk to you about this, because the former First Lady said her body buzzed with fury after hearing the president say that he could grab women's genitals during the campaign. What was your reaction when you heard the former First Lady talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, she was articulating or capturing, if you will, the feelings, I'm sure, of lots of women and hopefully lots of men as well. But, one point that Rick was making about the president being petty, I mean, he specializes in petty. When the First Lady says when they go low, we go high, President Trump says that when they go low, I go lower. I mean, that really is his MO. It has been his MO as a candidate. It is his MO as president. And, the First Lady also said in her book, or wrote in her book, about how his comments about birtherism, Don, put her family's life in jeopardy. I mean, that's real. And what he could have done is simply apologize. But he can't do that. He has out-trumped himself this week.
Stay with me, everyone. I want to hear a lot more from you. The president attacking and demeaning a trio of respected black female White House reporters. We're going to play his word. After his party lost the House in Tuesday's midterms, President Trump has spent the rest of the week lashing out at the media, Democrats, other opponents. But a lot of his attacks were specifically aimed at black women journalists. Back now with me, Nina Turner, Alice Stewart, and Rick Wilson. So let's just roll the tape before we dive into this. Here it is.
On the campaign trail, you called yourself a nationalist. Some people saw that as emboldening white nationalists. Now people are also
I don't
saying
know why you'd
that
say
the
that.
president.
That's such a racist question.
Same thing with April Ryan. I watch her get up. I mean, you talk about somebody that's a loser. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. She gets publicity, and then she gets a pay raise, or she gets a contract with, I think, CNN. But she's very nasty, and she shouldn't be.
Do you want him to rein in Robert Mueller?
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
Okay, so he says for April, I think CNN, but then he tells Abby, well, he says he doesn't watch CNN, but he says, I watch you a lot, and Abby, of course, it's on CNN, so anyway, but I digress. There is, Nina, there's a method to the madness and the vicious tone from this president to 3 journalists just trying to do their jobs.
Absolutely, Don, and there's a lot to unpack here. Got a big suitcase on this one. I mean, you know, loser, stupid. I mean, this president, he has disparaged African Americans, you know, in particular in ways that are deep. And these stereotypes, these words that he uses towards African Americans, they're rooted in a type of stereotype in this country that has been hard for African Americans to come from under because of the deep-seated racism in this country. He understands exactly what he's saying and what he's doing when he uses those types of terms when referring to African Americans in general and African American women in particular. And it was just to hear what he was saying to Abby. I mean, all of it was bad, from the First Lady to April to Yamiche, but just to, you know, that clip that you just played about what he said to Abby just made my skin crawl. It just made me cringe. He is doing these kinds of things deliberately. He should be ashamed of himself, but I know that he is not.
I want to put this up. This is another view of President Trump addressing our very own. Look at that, okay, Abby Phillip. I mean,
he's a bully.
Yeah, Alice, look at that. I mean, addressing. First of all, a president saying that's a stupid question, but beyond that, go on, tell me, what does this tell you, especially that photo?
Well, we have virtually the exact same photo from yesterday, him doing the same thing to Jim Acosta, and he's also called Jim and John Carl and many others stupid and dumb questions, and that photo right there is chilling for a lot of reasons. I come from the news world, but I also have worked on communications for presidential candidates, and there needs to be a lower temperature with regard to this administration, how the press is handled. It just needs to go down. And look, when you're the president of the United States and you ask for the resignation of your AG and replace him with someone that has been critical of the Mueller investigation, as a president, you should be prepped that one of the questions you're going to be asked is, are you expecting this Mueller investigation to be reined in? Abby's question was not a stupid question. It was the question of the day. He simply just didn't want to answer it. Yeah. So instead of answering the question or just deflecting or saying no, he attacked her. And I just think that's the wrong way to go about it. And it doesn't make it even any better to say that he's an equal opportunity offender. But at the end of the day, it just so happens the last few days have been African-American women, but he has a long history of treating many members of the media this way, and I just don't think it's a smart way to go about
Rick,
it.
I'm going to give you the last word, Rick, but Nina, just as you...
Yeah, I understand what Alice is saying, but what I want Alice to understand and the viewers to understand, that there's historic significance to the stereotypes of calling African-Americans dumb and losers and stupid. He even called Omarosa a dog. So even though he has said some disparaging things to white reporters, there is a deep-seated essence historically in this country when it comes to the stereotyping of African Americans.
One of his favorite targets is Maxine Waters as well,
yes.
Obviously a black woman. But what do you say about this, Rick? What do you think? Because it's hard to ignore that the way he spoke to them, all of them were African American women. And I got to tell you, I was out today, and people came up to me and said, but when he said yesterday to April, sit down, they were particular, and these weren't just black people. These are people from all different ethnicities saying, it made my skin crawl.
I think that angry Donald Trump is often closer to the true core of this guy than anything else we see. And in all these exchanges, particularly when he was telling April to sit down, all I could think of was this guy's like 1 millisecond away from the N-word. He hates her. It's obvious. It's tangible, and his inability to control his anger and his temper is remarkable. And I think as we enter this time of increasing stress on him, he's going to continue to lash out at the press, because the only card he has left to play is making the white gnats happy and using his hatred of the media to keep the former conservative base, now Trump base, delighted. That's their bread and butter issue now, is hating the media. So he's going to do everything he can to keep that up, and I don't think he's got much control over his affect when he's talking to a lot of these reporters, particularly the African American reporters in question this week.
And it's only going to get worse, as you said. He's been rattled this week, and so we can look. He's attacking Macron, and on it just after he landed on French soil. A fascinating conversation. I wish we had more time. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
everyone be safe
You
out
too.
there. And tone it down. Tone it down. We'll be right back.